were already proving with archaeological evidence that everything that was written about this temple was wrong. She was a mother, she was a wife, she was a queen, she was a goddess.
My God, it goes down more than 2 meters.
Everyone argues about Cleopatra's race. Was she African? Was she European? The fight never ends. Here's the part both sides keep missing. Cleopatra was not really Egyptian at all. Her family came from somewhere else entirely, ruled Egypt for nearly 3 centuries, and married almost only inside their own bloodline to hold the throne. That choice left a kind of genetic fingerprint. And in 2025, a team of scientists in Vienna ran ancient DNA on a skeleton that was supposed to be Cleopatra's own sister. Those bones had sat in a tomb in Turkey for 2,000 years. The results did not just surprise the scientists. They wiped out a story the world had believed for over a decade. And the answer to who Cleopatra truly was starts with a soldier who stole a dead man's body. His name was Ptolemy, a Macedonian Greek general, one of the most trusted bodyguards of Alexander the Great. And when Alexander died young, with no clear heir, his empire was carved up by his generals like meat off a bone. Ptolemy took Egypt, but he wanted more than land. He wanted the right to rule. So he did something daring. He hijacked Alexander's funeral march, seized the body, and carried it to Egypt to bury it himself. Because whoever held Alexander held a piece of the legend. In the year 305 BC, Ptolemy stopped calling himself a governor and crowned himself king, Pharaoh, a Greek man on the throne of Egypt. And the dynasty he founded would rule for 275 years, all the way down to one final queen, Cleopatra. Here's the part that changes everything. This family never stopped being Greek. They ruled Egypt from the city of Alexandria, a Greek city they built into the brightest place in the ancient world, home to the greatest library on earth. But they spoke Greek in the palace, not Egyptian. They kept their Macedonian names: Ptolemy, Cleopatra, Arsinoe, Berenice, the same small handful of names used over and over for 9 generations. For most of those generations, the Ptolemy kings never even bothered to learn the Egyptian language. They ruled millions of Egyptians from behind a Greek wall of language and custom, with gods and festivals brought in from a homeland across the sea. They saw themselves as Greek royalty who happened to own the richest kingdom on the planet. So when you picture Cleopatra as the timeless face of ancient Egypt, you have it backwards. She was the last ruler of a Greek dynasty that sat on top of Egypt like a crown that never quite fit the head. But keeping a bloodline Greek in a foreign land takes work. And the Ptolemies found a method that still makes people flinch. They married each other, not distant cousins, brothers married sisters. It began early. Ptolemy II married his own full sister, Arsinoe II. To the Greek world watching, this was shocking. One poet mocked the marriage out loud and reportedly paid for the joke with his life. But the Ptolemies did not care what Greece thought. They based themselves on the old Egyptian gods, Isis and Osiris, a brother and sister who were also husband and wife. And across the generations, it hardened into almost a rule. Brother and sister, uncle and niece, cousin and cousin, again and again and again. Now think about what that does to a family tree. Nearly everyone has 16 great-great-grandparents. Cleopatra had about 6. Her family tree did not branch outward. It folded in on itself, the same names looping back, pulling tight like a knot. This is the genetic fingerprint. A bloodline sealed this tightly leaves a mark you can read, even thousands of years later, if you can find one clean sample to test. And there is something else this family was known for: turning on their own. Ptolemy fathers turned against their sons. Brothers turned on brothers. Mothers and children went to war over the throne. It was one of the most cold-blooded royal families that ever lived. So for a long time, scientists dreamed of testing a real Ptolemy, a real member of this twisted, brilliant, bloody family, lying in a tomb, waiting. And for one brief electric moment, they thought they had found exactly that. Here is where the story stops being clean. For all those careful, planned marriages, Cleopatra's own family tree has 2 holes in it, 2 ghosts. We know her father, Ptolemy XII, a king the Romans mocked as the flute player because he liked to play music at festivals, which his enemies thought was shameful for a ruler. That part is solid. But her father was himself born outside of marriage, and the identity of his mother, which means Cleopatra's own grandmother, is a blank. We truly do not know who she was. Then there is Cleopatra's mother. Historians generally assume she was a Ptolemy queen named Cleopatra V. Assume, because the records fall silent right around the time Cleopatra was born, and they never clearly named the woman who gave birth to her, and this was dangerous ground for her. Cleopatra had powerful enemies in Rome who would have loved to brand her a false queen with no right to the throne. The fact that they never quite managed it is one reason some historians believe her mother truly was a full Ptolemy. But believe is not the same as know. So we have the most famous woman in all of history, and we cannot name her mother for sure, and we cannot name her grandmother at all. Two missing women, two open doors, and one respected historian walks straight through them. His name is Duane Roller, who wrote one of the most careful modern books about Cleopatra's life, and Roller raised an honest possibility. What if one of those missing women, the mother or the grandmother, was not Greek at all? What if she came from the local Egyptian upper class, perhaps from a powerful family of Egyptian priests? If that were true, then Cleopatra carried real Egyptian blood, not as a costume she wore for her people, in her veins. Roller is careful to call this a likely chance, not a proven fact. But it cracks open a door on a question almost everyone treats as closed. Was the last queen of Egypt partly Egyptian after all? The honest answer is, we cannot be sure, and we may never be. So let us actually answer the bigger question. What was Cleopatra by blood? Strip away the movies and the modern shouting matches and look only at the record. The clear answer from historians is this. Cleopatra was, first and above all, Macedonian Greek. The blood of that soldier who stole Alexander's body ran straight down to her 9 generations later. But Greek is not quite the whole story. Remember those careful marriages. To make strong allies, the Ptolemies sometimes married into another Greek dynasty next door, the Seleucids, who ruled a huge empire that reached toward Persia. One of those royal brides was a princess named Cleopatra I, and her ancestry traced back to a woman from Central Asia, from the old lands of Persia and beyond. So, woven into Cleopatra's Greek bloodline is a real thread of Persian ancestry. That much historians are sure about. What there is no solid proof for, and this part matters, is the idea that Cleopatra was Black African. The scholars who have spent entire careers on this find nothing in the record to support it. One historian put it bluntly, Cleopatra was about as Egyptian as Elizabeth Taylor, the actress who would one day make her famous. Greek by blood, Egyptian only by the accident of where her family had seized power, which is exactly why a single television show set off a global firestorm. In 2023, a streaming documentary cast Cleopatra as a Black woman. Egypt's own former head of ancient sites openly called it false. The show went on to earn one of the lowest audience scores in the platform's history, and that bitter fight told you something real. People are still desperate to claim Cleopatra, to see their own face looking back from hers 2,000 years after she died. But the woman herself left clues about what she actually looked like, and they do not match the legend at all. To reach those clues, we have to go to the one place in this whole story that finally touches something physical, a body. For decades, there was one tempting possibility. A single member of Cleopatra's family whose actual bones we might still have. Her sister, her name was Arsinoe IV, and her life ended in one of the cruelest chapters of Cleopatra's reign. When Cleopatra fought a bitter civil war for the throne, Arsinoe backed the other side. She lost. She was dragged to Rome and paraded through the streets in chains as a trophy. And a few years later, in the year 41 BC, Cleopatra had her own sister hunted down and killed on the steps of a temple in the city of Ephesus, in what is now Turkey. A sister sacrificed to protect a crown. And in that same city of Ephesus, archaeologists later found something strange. A grand tomb, shaped like an 8-sided tower, standing right in the middle of the main street. And there was a reason people tied this strange tomb to Egypt. Its 8-sided shape seemed to echo the most famous building in Cleopatra's world, the towering lighthouse of Alexandria, one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. A tomb built to look like that lighthouse, in the very city where Arsinoe met her end, felt like it could only point to one person. Inside, there was a single skeleton, no name, no writing, just bones in a stone coffin. Austrian researchers had dug it out back in the early 1900s. One scientist carried the skull away to study it, measured it carefully, and then, somewhere in the chaos of the century that followed, the skull vanished, lost, gone. If you are the kind of person who would rather know the real story than the comfortable one, take a second and subscribe. This channel exists to dig up the truth behind the names you only thought you knew. Now, back to that missing skull. Because in 2009, a theory exploded across the world. A team argued that this 8-sided tomb belonged to Arsinoe, Cleopatra's sister, and using the old measurements of that missing skull, they claimed the shape of the head pointed to African ancestry. The headlines wrote themselves. Cleopatra's sister was part African, so perhaps Cleopatra was too. A documentary aired. The story spread everywhere. For more than 10 years, it sat in books and articles as a kind of proof. There was just one problem. Nobody had ever tested the actual bones with modern science, until, at last, somebody did. In 2025, a team of scientists at the University of Vienna published their results. They had taken the bones from that 8-sided tomb. The skeleton claimed for years to be Cleopatra's sister, and they ran every modern test they had. CT scans down to the finest detail, radiocarbon dating, and the one thing the researchers in the 1920s never could do: ancient DNA. This was not a single rush test. The team pulled DNA from the skull and from a thigh bone and proved the two came from the very same person. They did, and every line of evidence pointed the same way. The DNA answered the question in a way nobody saw coming. The skeleton was not Arsinoe. The skeleton was not even female. It was a boy. A child, somewhere between 11 and 14 years old when he died. His bones showed signs of a serious growth disorder, a skull that had grown unevenly, a jaw that never formed the way it should. The damage was so unusual that the scientists compared it to a rare condition that twists how the face and jaw take shape. And his DNA did not point to Egypt or to Africa or to Greece. It pointed to Italy, most likely to the island of Sardinia or the Italian mainland. This was, probably, a young Roman boy who had lived a hard life in a small, struggling body and somehow ended up buried in a monument fit for a queen, far from home. Sit with that for a moment. For over a decade, the world believed it had found the African sister of Cleopatra. An entire argument about the queen's race had been stacked on top of these bones, and it was a Roman child who had nothing to do with Cleopatra at all. The story did not simply turn out to be wrong. It turned out to be about a completely different person from a completely different place. So the one physical clue everyone had been leaning on quietly fell apart. And that leaves us with a strange and frankly haunting truth. Here it is. We have never found Cleopatra. Her tomb has never been found for certain. One archaeologist has spent nearly 20 years searching for it, digging beneath an ancient temple west of Alexandria. She has pulled up coins stamped with Cleopatra's face and even a long tunnel carved through solid rock. But the queen herself has stayed hidden. And now that the bones in Turkey have turned out to belong to a Roman boy, there is no proven ancient DNA from anyone in Cleopatra's direct family. None at all. That is worth pausing on. The most famous woman in human history, and there is not one clean genetic sample from her bloodline anywhere on Earth. So how do we know anything about her face? We have one source that she controlled herself: her coins. Cleopatra put her own face, alone, on the coins of her kingdom, money she put out in her own name as a ruling queen. And the woman stamped into that silver is not the soft Hollywood beauty with the painted eyes. She has a sharp, hooked nose, a strong, jutting chin, a heavy jaw. It is the face of a ruler who wanted to look powerful, not pretty. The handful of statues that historians actually trust, one in Berlin, one in the Vatican, show the very same strong features and the same Greek royal hairstyle. The legend turned her into a great, dazzling beauty. The Roman writer Plutarch, who had access to people who knew her world, said something different. He wrote that her real power was not her looks, but her presence, her voice, the way her mind worked. This was a Macedonian Greek queen with a possible thread of Egyptian blood we may never prove, who spoke several languages and became the first ruler in her family in nearly 300 years to bother learning the language of the Egyptians she ruled. She held off the full weight of Rome longer than anyone believed possible. So that is who she really was. But it leaves one last door standing wide open. If the bones in Turkey were not her sister, then where is the real Arsinoe? And bigger still, where is Cleopatra herself? Somewhere, maybe buried beneath the streets of a modern city, or sunk under the water off the coast of Egypt, there may still be a tomb waiting. And if it is ever found, ancient DNA could finally settle the question that 2,000 years of arguing never could. That search is still going on, right now. We followed one of those searches, the hunt for Cleopatra's lost tomb, in another video, and it is waiting for you on screen right now. Go watch it, because the queen with a face like a blade is still out there, somewhere, waiting to be found.